What is up guys, Fi here, and today is the day we're finally going to be doing an in-depth Vayne guide, and you guys have been asking for this for ages. So we're going to go through builds, we're going to go through lane phase, bit of team fighting, tips and tricks, and also how you beat Vayne as well. But let's start things off with a quick overview. So Vayne is considered one of the harder, if not the hardest AD carries to play, but I definitely think she's also one of the most rewarding. Her lane phase is supposed to be her weakest phase, right? She's supposed to be this late game beast, but she can actually win or go even, and I'm going to show you parts of how you do that in the lane phase part of this video. And she can hard carry a game, and part of that is because she has such an insane late game, and she almost always wins a 1v1, which is also kind of a good comeback mechanic. Like if you get a little bit behind and you find someone alone, then you normally come out on top. Another thing that most people don't think about is actually kind of the psychological effect of when you're playing against a Vayne. Like if you get ahead on Vayne, then the enemy team will get demoralized and start to give up a little bit just because they know how strong Vayne is late game. So all of those things together give you a pretty good AD carry package, like a complete package, right? But there are a couple of problems, like she can be bullied in lane and she can get behind. She's really weak to AoE damage in team fights, and she does need time in a fight to do damage. So let's move on to the build side, like the masteries, runes, items, the theory side of it, right? So for masteries and runes, I'm not really going to go too in depth onto them because they're very standard stuff. The only thing I will say is that attack speed is so good on Vayne, that's why I throw so much into my rune page. The thing that you could change on the rune page is taking out the attack speed blues that I use and putting in magic resist instead, if you're just dying a little bit too fast. So there are kind of two normal builds, I guess, on Vayne, and one of them is pretty common and one of them is not so common. We'll go through the not so common one first, and that's going to be Bloodthirster, Phantom Dancer, Infinity Edge, and Last Whisper. Now this build is focused more around your crit than attack speed. You'll max your Q if you're going to go for this build, and it makes your lane phase stronger with Bloodthirster, but you just don't have as much damage going into your mid game. The most common build, and the one I suggest, is Blade of the Ruined King, Phantom Dancer, Infinity Edge, and Last Whisper. So this build is focused more around attack speed, and that's why you'd max your W with this build, and it kind of builds to the crits later on. So the common build is the thing that you're going to be using most of the time, right? But I'm going to show you one more build, and this is the build I've kind of been testing recently, and I've been having pretty good results with it. So the first item is going to be Blade of the Ruined King as normal, and then I'm going to go into an Avarice Blade, and this is kind of where it gets a little bit different. So there are kind of two paths, right, from your Avarice. So either I'll go Phantom Dancer, Ghost Blade, Infinity Edge, or I'll go the Avarice into Shiv, IE, and then Last Whisper. Now with the Ghost Blade, it's really good 1v1. Like you can quickly kill someone with the Ghost Blade active, you're more bursty, and you're really easy to kite in team fights as well because of the speed up. The good thing with this is the build structure lets you adjust during the game too. So if you still want that quick kill and the games are going okay, then Phantom Dancer after Avarice, and Avarice turns into Ghost Blade. The cool thing with sitting on this Avarice for so long as well is you actually get a lot of gold, like an extra 300 to 400 gold on the Avarice before you upgrade it into the Ghost Blade. If the game is starting to go downhill a bit, like it's starting to go a little bit bad, then remember that Shiv accelerates your build. It's much cheaper than Phantom Dancer with the Avarice gold as well, so we can get Shiv into IE, which is just more sustained damage. The point here is that we'll get our IE much quicker even if PD does give more crit. Now we know what Vayne is good at, we know how to build her, runes, masteries and stuff before the game, so let's jump into the actual game stuff. Now the first thing is tips and tricks, and honestly there aren't really too many tips and tricks, but there are a couple of things we can go over that will just give you that little bit of an advantage. Now the first thing is trading in lane. There's a cheeky little trade that you can do where you can auto, then use your Q and follow it up with your E, which is going to give you 3 bolt procs and also send the enemy flying away from you. Now, this is a really good trade just because there's no way they can ever return it. It's a good chunk of damage, but it does take a lot of your mana, so you don't want to do it too often. Now another thing, and this is more strategy side I guess and actually a little trick, is that mid game a lot of ADs will push bot lane alone, and we've already said that Vayne is really good 1v1, right? So try and actually look for them when they're doing this. Wait for them and kill them 1v1 and get yourself ahead. Now another tip for Vayne, this time in team fights, is when you have your ultimate on and you tumble away. Like a lot of people will just instantly attack after a tumble, and sometimes you actually don't want to do that. When you tumble in your ultimate, you're granted stealth, right? So the enemies can't see you, and that actually gives you some time to get some distance before attacking. It sounds kind of obvious, but most people just don't abuse the stealth because they're not really thinking about it. Like you don't see the stealth yourself, right? But trust me, for enemies it's really confusing. The final couple of things are actually covered in my last tip video, but it's the flash condemn, which is really hard to dodge, you're seeing on screen now, and also the wall tumble reset. With the flash condemn, it's just using your ability and then flashing to change the direction, and with the wall tumble, it's standing next to a wall tumbling so you get the reset on the auto attack immediately rather than letting the animation play out. So the lane phase, the hardest phase typically of any Vayne game, and this section is going to be focusing on how you can win your lane or at least not lose it too hard either. The big focus you should have on Vayne when you're in lane is farming, and then you trade when you're not going to miss a CS early. So there are two distinct ways of playing Vayne in lane. You can either be aggressive or you can be defensive, and actually that sounds really obvious, but there is a really big distinction between the two different playstyles. So when you're aggressive, you want to auto and then tumble straight away after to poke. You can even auto a minion and then just tumble to the side and attack the enemy AD. It catches them off guard a lot. You'll also be using your condemn aggressively as well to try and set up kills or at least set up a really good trade for you. So you're using it as a stun, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. Now typically this playstyle revolves around pushing or freezing in the middle, and you're going to have lane control and just bully your opponent. So in a defensive lane, this completely flips on its head, and sometimes like you'll be in a hard matchup or you're just being pushed, and this is when you want to switch over to doing it this way instead. Now using a tumble defensively is really important, so you're going to auto a minion just like normal and then tumble away. So tumbling out puts good distance between you and the enemy AD, and they just can't reach you after taking a CS, so you're still able to farm and take no damage in return. So just like we're using our tumble differently this time, we're going to be using our condemn differently as well, and we're not going to be using it to try and set up a stun this time. We're just going to use it to get the enemy AD away. So if we have a little bit of a closer look at the condemn, this is really important by the way for when you're playing aggressively in lane. Now these are the typical places that if the enemy AD is standing, it's good to start a fight for an easy stun. So if they're standing here, anywhere along this line, then you can tumble to the side or you can even flash and you can get a stun onto the wall, and it's really easy. The same thing here, they have to run along this line to get to their tower, which gives you a lot of time to condemn them into the wall behind them. Vayne has a lot of damage in lane, and it's a surprising amount of damage too, but she needs time to do that damage, and getting a condemn to stun is really giving you that time to kill someone rather than just poke them out. Just to save making this video really long and going over it now, I've actually done teamfight breakdowns for Vayne already, so I'm going to pop a link for them down below and also at the end of the video. So final thing then, how do you beat a Vayne? Like what would you do if you're against a Vayne? The first two things can be done in champion select, so you pick burst and you pick crowd control. These two things are Vayne's worst nightmare, and if you combine the both, then that is amazing. Like Annie has burst and crowd control, she is great. Rengar is the same. Vi is also really good because she can lock her down and do a ton of damage. When we're looking at bot lane specifically, we want to pick a strong laner who deals damage quickly, so someone like Corki, Draven or Graves are all really good against Vayne. So when we're looking at the other side of the lane, like the support side of the lane, we want to be picking a strong support who does damage and also can take a lot of damage as well. So someone like Nautilus, Leona and Thresh are really good against Vayne. The final two things are upgrading your sweepers so you can actually see Vayne when she tumbles away, and buying pink wards for exactly the same reason, because in team fights you drop them and it's a lot easier to deal with Vayne when you can see her. So there you go, there's in-depth Vayne, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I put a lot of time into it, so make sure you like it. If you did enjoy it, let me know who you want to see in the comments below, but as always I will catch you in my next video.